Hey friends, welcome back to the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. Scott Martindale, my wife Vanessa, and today we're going to talk about establishing the right priorities. Understanding that life is busy.
Yes.
It is chaotic. If you're a blended family, then you obviously have even more distractions and things that get in the way of time. Vanessa, talk about how busy our life is. Like, what does it look like?
Absolutely. So we are a family of 6. We have 4 boys. We have a 13-year-old, big gap, and then we have a 5, 4, and 3. And so our daily is just, we're running in so many different directions. Our oldest son goes to a school that's in between our house and his father's house, and it's 25 minutes from where we live, versus where our 3 boys go to school, which is literally just down the road. And so, starting our morning off doing that, and then in the afternoons when it's pickup, and then you have sports and activities and church, it just gets crazy really fast.
Yeah, and that's not even including deciding what to give everybody for dinner.
Yes.
So one person wants this. I mean, it is insane. Thank God for DoorDash. We love DoorDash.
Yes.
Not to name drop or anything, but the truth of it is we are busy people. Our lives are chaotic, and it's really, really easy to get priorities out of line. So we want to go back and look at the biblical principles of how God designed our lives and how we should look at our priorities and how we should prioritize not only our time, but our focus and our energy. So basically what we're going to do is look at the first priority being God, being our relationship with Christ. The second being our marriage. Third, our children. Fourth, our work. And then beyond that, our family and our friends, our extended family and friends. So let's just talk about relationships, establishing God as your first priority in your relationship. Vanessa, tell me about the practical side of that. What does that look like if somebody's saying, well, how do I do that?
For us, when we first got married, it was going to church as a family. Like, that was a no-breaker deal for us. We were going to go to church every Sunday, on Wednesdays, if they had group. And that was just something that we established from the beginning, that Jesus Christ and our faith was the center focus of not only our marriage, but of our family. And if that was our foundation, our firm foundation that our marriage and family stood on, then nothing in this fallen world could ever move that. And so for us, that is something that we've established from the beginning. It's also about surrounding yourself in community with friends, getting to know the pastors at your church, getting involved in some classes, life groups, small groups. Those are really big things. Surrounding yourself by other believers who can walk along beside you in life. Scripture says in Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. And so, just really putting God as the focus and just surrounding yourself with godly friends and community, it's something that can really not only protect your marriage and your family, but it's something that can help you grow in your faith as well.
Yeah, and adding prayer as a daily part of your life.
Yes.
I know it's been really, one of the funnest things about the kids and prayer is watching them develop in prayer. Even as our 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds, we always ask them to pray for dinner. And normally it's more about thanking God for Legos and for firemen, for police stations. But the moral of that story is they're starting to get the idea that prayer and community around God is the center focus of the world that we live in. Also praying as spouses. I know in counseling, I've worked with a lot of couples, and when we talk about, do you pray together? It's almost like, well, no. And my question is why wouldn't you? It's one of the most intimate things, if not the most intimate thing you can do with your spouse. So by adding these things in, not just as options, but as priorities, you're going to find yourself constantly focusing on the source, on God, on that relationship. And we talked about in previous podcasts about grace and extending grace in your marriage. That's another part of that just starts that process. If you're constantly engaged in an intimate conversation with God, you're going to find yourself wanting to do that more often.
Absolutely. And, one of the examples that we teach in our class when it comes to prioritizing your life and your family is if you think of the triangle example where God is the point, you're one corner, and your spouse is the other corner, the closer that you and your spouse are growing to Christ in your own time and in your own personal relationship, the closer that you both are going to grow towards one another and towards Christ together. But if we put our children above that, or even if you put your spouse above God, it throws everything out of alignment. And so when we keep God as our number one priority, you guys, everything else falls into place exactly the way that it should.
Yeah, and the next priority is biblically is our marriage. Yes. I know that one of the things that Vanessa and I really try to do is keep our marriage as a focal point right behind our relationship with God. But that's something we did early on, and we did it very intentionally.
Yes.
We set out boundaries for what we wanted our marriage to look like, and what we wanted, even in the context of our blended family, how we were going to set the context of our marriage. So, Vanessa, what do you think are the primary focus points of having a marriage designed around the way God intended it?
I think a lot of it has to do with just serving one another, giving each other grace. I know that we established a word for our marriage 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. We said if we could have one word for our marriage, what would it be? And it was grace, just having that unending grace, because you guys, life is hard, and especially blended families. Blended families can be chaotic, and they can just be hard and messy sometimes. But when we can give that same grace that God so lavishly gives us all the time to one another and extend that throughout our blended family, it can just make a world of difference, and it can just bring so much unity, not only to your marriage, but into your family. Serving one another. I know that there's days when Scott's had a long, hard day at work, and he hits that door, and he's coming into chaos because one kid's climbing in the pantry to get the goldfish while I'm cooking dinner. Another one's, throwing Legos, and one's riding the dog or whatever it is. But he comes in ready to serve and jump in and just do whatever he can to not only serve me, but to serve our children. And so I think it's just, prioritizing, mm-hmm. what is important in your marriage? What is important to you? And for us, prayer is a big part of that. We wake up in the morning and we pray for one another throughout the day. If I feel like I get a word from the Lord for Scott, I'll send it to him, but just mm-hmm. constantly covering him in prayer, covering our marriage in prayer, covering our family in prayer. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we mm-hmm. always close in prayer together and over our family.
Yeah, and all those are great things, but it still doesn't negate some of the problems that you experience every day. Yeah. So, and Vanessa touched on this, being in a blended family is tough. And one of the words that I get a lot when it comes to blended families is frustration. You're frustrated because a lot of times you cannot control the outcome of what's going on around you. And we'll talk about those kind of situations, but one of the byproducts of frustration is I'm going to take it out on somebody who's closest to me. So if I'm frustrated, if she's frustrated, it comes out in our relationship. So when we talk about grace, that is a big part of that, and understanding that your spouse is there for you. They're rooting for you to succeed. They're rooting so that you're happy and you're taken care of. So not allowing that frustration, or more so just inserting grace over that, is a huge part of taking care of the health of your marriage. And also, just for all the husbands out there, when he talks about grace, wives, if it's in the middle of the night and your husband's snoring, that's what he needs. Lots of grace, because I know that's the tough part about marriage. We have to sleep. Anything else that you can think of, Vanessa, that when it comes to marriage and it comes to setting that as a priority, what are the things that you would suggest healthy marriages do?
One scripture that we were talking about the other day was, it was Ephesians 5:25, and it was talking about, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church first. And in this verse and in this chapter, the Apostle Paul really emphasizes and puts the husband's responsibility forth and his duty. And it was after obeying and glorifying the Father that he served the church. And so, and for wives, it's the same thing as well. We are supposed to love our husbands and serve them the best way that we can. And so, I know that whenever you walk in that door, you're serving me, but I'm also trying to do the same for you, because I know that you've had a long, hard day. So just really opening yourself up to, what can I do for my spouse to better help them today? Or, what can I do to serve them well?
Yeah, it's the one unique relationship, marriage, that you have is the more that you can pour into it, the more that you will get out of it. And unfortunately, in our society and the way that, sometimes we get as people, we become selfish. And that selfish nature, that take nature, is the one thing that takes away the most from our marriage. And then if we're taking from our marriage, we're taking from our relationship with God. Yeah. So understanding that being a servant is the best way for you to enjoy your marriage the most. And I know a lot of times we do get selfish and we think, well, life is hard. I have to do this, I have to do this, and I have to do this. Let me answer that and say, you're right, you do. You absolutely have to do all those things. Yes, you have to be a servant. Yes, you have to provide for your family. And men, speaking directly to you, understand that that's the way God made us. We were made with broad shoulders to carry heavy loads. There's a reason that God designed the man like that, so that we could do that. So don't think that life is unfair to you because you have these responsibilities. Be grateful that, number one, that God designed us to handle those responsibilities, and that He had also made us a helper as a wife that can support us in carrying out that vision. So absolutely. God first, marriage second, and then comes the kiddos. Yes. And we know this is a point of contention, because a lot of people do put their kids' needs, and I would fair to say majority of marriages put their kids' needs above their marriage. So it's what the kids need above what the husband or the wife needs. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make in marriage. Setting the example to your children of what a healthy marriage looks like is the greatest gift that you can give them beyond introducing them to their Savior. So Vanessa, how do you think marriages and setting the priorities for the children beyond that plays out in real life?
With the kids, it is hard, and this is something that we've dealt with before. Just being transparent and honest. Your children are going to grow up one day and move out into the world.
And I'm going to be left with this one.
And
we're going to have to live together after this is over.
Yes, and your children are going to get married, and you're going to have grandbabies, and it's going to be awesome, but you're going to be what we call empty nesters. And so it's about maintaining your marriage as a priority throughout these years, so that whenever your children are gone, like, you are still enjoying one another, and that you've maintained, or I shouldn't say maintained, but that you've been able to grow and develop your marriage throughout those years, so that whenever the children are gone, it's still going to be an amazing place that you can.
But you also need to as you make the children priority, understand that keeping your marriage first is a priority, but also you have to make time for your kiddos. And make them a priority, because that is a ministry in itself, raising your children. So one of the things that we would like to encourage you is, number one, devote your time to it. And as a culture, we're time starved right now. So there are plenty of things that can keep us occupied, from eyes open in the morning to eyes closed at night. So there is, whether it's work or it's driving your kids around, or you pick up your phone, which can really keep you entertained almost all the time. So we're time starved as it is. So we have to make it a priority and something of absolute importance to, number one, put technology aside, put any distractions aside, and give our kids one-on-one time. Whether that is groups as a family, and you're devoting everything you can to your family, or it is taking each individual child, if you have more than one, and spending one-on-one time with them, and making sure that your spouse has that ability. So you're giving that gift to each other of spending one-on-one time together.
Well, it's just about the intentionality. Just as Scott said, one of our boys loves to go grocery shopping. So he is my grocery shopping helper, and he goes with me every time that I go to the grocery store. The other one loves to go get the car washed with you. So that's his special thing that he does with Scott. Our oldest, our 13-year-old, we take him out to the movies and do special things with him. And so it's just setting an intentional time for each child, because they're all different. God created us all so different. He didn't make copycats. And so just being intentional with them, but also prioritizing our time. As Scott said, there are so many things that pull us in so many different directions, from the time we wake up, where it's, our phone is going off, our emails, are going off, social media. There's so many different things that pull us in so many different directions. And so when it comes to the family unit, how are you prioritizing your time emotionally, mentally, physically? Do you have to take that 7 p.m. phone call from a friend that you know is going to take an hour long? Do you have to go to that girls event that you have been planning to go to for the last month? Or, is it about staying home and working on the homework with your child? Whatever the case may be, it's about prioritizing your family's time and what is important, and not expending that on other things, so that when you do have that time with your family, you've not exhausted everything.
Yeah, and Vanessa and I talked about another situation that we had a while back when it comes to schedules and our time getting pulled and all these things. Understand that every one of those situations takes emotional energy. Yeah. So if your tank is on 0 at the end of the day, then you have nothing to give. Yeah. And part of, as your family grows and as your schedule gets more thin, you have to take opportunities to take back time. So again, we're not going to be able to do everything we want to do or everything people want us to do. We have to reserve some of that so that we have some energy to devote to our family, to our kids, to our marriage. Having that emotional energy in the tank, I think has made a huge difference for us. So Absolutely. We've had to say no to a lot of things just because we just can't commit to that. If you're looking at your schedule right now, or you're looking at, what's going on next week, and you see a full schedule, if you see 4 nights of your week are taken, I can assure you that you're going to find yourself on empty real quick. Especially with the children, and I just kind of want to touch on this, something we hadn't really discussed, but your children are only there for a certain amount of time, and they grow quick. Quick.
Yes.
Like we're just out of the diaper stage, because our little ones are 5, 4, and 3. So all of a sudden they're like doing stuff on their own, and it's kind of weird because they don't need us that much anymore. But eventually they're going to keep growing. So I would just say, try to slow down this time. Try to really enjoy it. And again, as we talked about marriage, try to invest in that marriage, because when they leave for college, you are going to be I do see this. Like one day it's going to be like they're gone and we're here, and it's kind of like, okay, what do we do?
What do we do?
Do we enjoy doing anything? And where are we at this point? So keep that priority: God, your marriage, your children, and then comes the work side of it. Obviously, we know we have to work to support our families, right. But there needs to be limits and priorities surrounding that. So one of the things that we're blessed to have around where we live is we have great resources, and some of the most amazing pastors that we've had an opportunity to hear and listen to their podcasts and their sermons. But one of the stories that came to my mind was a story that Matt Chandler told, who's a pastor from the Village Church, and he talked about the concept of when you come home from work, and as a man or as a mother, you're walking in and you're really, instead of walking in with the concept of let me just fall out and start recharging, it's really about turning the face and saying, okay, it's now time to serve, because this is the other part of my job.
Well, absolutely. And, our work is important, but that's not our first job. Our first job is our family and marriage, and that is our, first priority and commitment after God. And so when it comes to that time where you're getting home and just letting that fall off, but know that you're walking into the most important role, and really in ministry, your children and your wife, your marriage, it's a ministry in itself, and it's the 2 most important ministries you could ever have. And so just making that disconnection of leaving work and leaving it at the door,
Yeah.
That was kind of an issue with us for a while in our marriage, where Scott owns his own business, and so being able to leave that at work and not bring that into home, answering emails or answering phone calls, it's something that we really had to work at, but you've been doing a great job at that.
Well, and I think the example is right there in front of you. It never fails. The second I walk in the door, if my kids are here, they come screaming, running at me. They don't care if I've had a good day, a bad day, if I have work to do, they don't care. All they want is to spend time with me. So I think that in itself is the reminder that says, hey, there are bigger things that are involved with your presence than thinking about something that happened that day, or worrying about what you need to be doing the next day. All that will be there, Nothing, you're not going to change anything about the past, but what is right in front of you is that opportunity to love on that child, because that they will remember. They will remember the fact of what you did when you walked in the door and how you engaged with your children. The next priority we're going to talk about is the family, extended family, and the friends. Yeah. So if you're our age, number one, your parents are probably a little bit older, so they become, their priority and kind of what their needs are changes a little bit. And also, we have a lot of friends that we disconnect with that want to reconnect or want time or want things like that. And so, again, we're pulled in a lot of different directions. So how do we handle family priorities, extended friendships, things like that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, again, it's the whole prioritization that we've been talking about. God created us to be in community with one another. He didn't want us to be alone. And so having those life groups and those small group relationships, godly community friendships, they're so important and vital for our spiritual, emotional, and mental health. But at the same time, I know that, in this last season, me personally, I had to say no to some women's events, and I had to say no to some of the lunches with my friends and some of the girls' weekends with my friends. And it wasn't because I didn't want to, but it was just because of where God called me in this season. And my priority is my marriage and my husband. And then if there was time in that margin to allow some of those extra things, then absolutely. But, for me personally, I just go to the Lord and I ask, if this is something that I, can fit and do in my schedule at this time. And so, different seasons, different times call for different things. And so again, God first, marriage, your family, and if I have time for the rest, then great. But if I don't, then, it's okay. But, having those long-term healthy friendships and those people, that even though like you may not be there for a season, coming back, they're like, we still love you. Like, we get it. We understand it. That's, that's always awesome to have.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know if women struggle with that more than men do. I think women generally have a little bit bigger communities than men. But I think men need to recognize that, again, not to be in our selfish nature, not to do things or take away the priorities of God or our marriage or our children just to serve ourselves individually. So I would say all this to say this: you have to prioritize your time. Again, we live in one of the most time-starved environments that probably existed in the world. And we're in the United States is one of those cultures that literally wants to fit everything in 24 hours, including as little or as much sleep as you can possibly get. But is that the right way, and is that going to serve you long-term with the health of your marriage, your children, your relationship with God, all those things that we're setting out as priorities? I think that it's a great time to take a hard look at that and to ask yourself, am I doing the things that is taking care of the priorities that I want to set for my life? And again, I'll go back to it. These are intentional priorities. These are not things that are in theory or, these are good things to hear every now and then, or, wow, that's a great idea and I should do that. If you want your marriage to thrive, if you want your blended family to thrive, these are things that you must do so that all those things come in line and come in order. And I think if you do those, you're going to see amazing fruits of that. You're going to see blessings. You're going to see happiness that you just won't find other places. So, in closing, we're excited that you're here. We're excited. Thanks for listening to us as the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. Please take this opportunity to share and like this. If you don't have, if you're not yourself a blended family, but please, if you know one, please take an opportunity to share this.
Absolutely, you guys. And if there's any topics, we want to hear from you guys. We want to know what it is that you guys are struggling with so that we can address these topics and bring some biblical foundations to it as well. And so if you want to email us at info@blendedkingdomfamilies.com, again, that's info@blendedkingdomfamilies.com. We would love to just, hear your thoughts and hear what it is that you guys would love for us to talk about. Also, guys, we do on our website have a prayer wall. If you need prayer, we are here for you. We want to pray with you, over you, and for you. So please check that out as well. And again, you guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you back next week. Be blessed in all that you do.
Thank you.